Sound the recruiting cannons. The Badgers have good news on that front. Let's talk about it. Plus, what did Hunter Wohler have to say and why I think it was about time?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the best place to buy all of your tickets. Make sure that's where you're going to go if you're going to get your tickets. Use the code Locked On. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about. Listen, there's been a lot of frustrations of late, a lot of annoyance. Obviously, this football program, but we got to sound the cannons. We have a commit for the Badgers team. It's been a while since we talked about it, but I think it is a big one, and let's sound those cannons.
Fire the recruiting cannons. Another one is headed to Madison on Wisconsin.
All right, so Michael Roeske, high 3-star composite offensive tackle out of Potomac, Wisconsin, commits to the Badgers, 6'7", 290. He's listed at about 260. He's 290, right? 6'7", 6'8", huge frame, really, really good player. I want to start, before we even get into Roeske's game, with a comment a lot of people have talked about. A lot of people have come to me with this comment, and that comment is essentially, how are we going to recruit? How are we going to recruit when this team continues to lose, when it continues to look like it has on the field? And I've now been lucky enough to talk to quite a few recruits, prospects, players over the course of the last year. I can tell you almost unequivocally, they don't care as much as fans care about the wins and losses. They just don't. Now, every player is different because every person is different, right? And certainly there are some, I'm not going to say every player doesn't care about the product on the field, but in year one of Fickell, I'm telling you right now, that this coaching staff is selling a narrative. And the narrative is, we just got here. Our first year in Cincinnati wasn't very good either. And then look what we did with that program. We brought them to a playoff appearance. And that's what we're doing here. You can be part of that solution. You can be part of that fix, right? They're selling playing time. So again, it's not that the worry is unfounded, and there might be a player or two that decommits. Maybe it is because they don't love what they're seeing on the field. But I'm telling you, it is a far smaller factor than fans think it is. Players see playing time. Players see the ability to get on the field quickly. And that's what the staff is selling. So I mean, you're coming off one of the worst Badger performances since ... right? And immediately after that, you see Michael Roeske commit. Again, the product on the field doesn't impact recruiting, especially in year one. Now, if this is year 3 or 4, that's a problem, right? Because then other staffs can say, they're selling you a bag of lies, right? It's not working. It's not turning around. But in year one, this staff is just going to sell, you're part of the solution, right? You're going to have playing time, et cetera, et cetera. DJ Maytag in the chat says, recruit player, they recognize they're going to get playing time ASAP. Everybody coming in here better be thinking I can beat out who's on the field now. Players typically think that anyway, but they're going to sell that now, right? They're absolutely going to sell that now. Curtis says recruits have to see the possibility for early playing time. 100% like that. And then here's the thing with recruiting. Whatever narrative currently works is what, and I'm just broadly saying this, is what recruiters are going to use. If this team was undefeated and number 3 in the country, that's the narrative recruiters would use, right? They would say, you come here and immediately play for a national title. With the team struggling, they're going to say, you can come here and immediately play for playing time, right? That's just how this works, right? This is how this narrative works. It's interesting, it's funny, but that's exactly what's happening. So let's talk about Roeske for a little bit. Roeske is a big time talent, high 3-star, but he's a 4-star player. I think at the end of the cycle, you're going to see him as that 4-star player. He is huge. He can run. I said in one of my tweets when he committed, I was like, he runs like an elk. Like he's huge, absolutely huge and fluid. We had Brian Smith on. Brian Smith's somebody who absolutely loves Roeske, right? He talked about it on a previous show. I'll have Brian Smith on again. It's a little tricky right now because I'm on travel and don't have all of my stuff. But Roeske checks every box you're really looking for that big offensive lineman, right? Big frame, checks that box. Really good film. The film is awesome. Point of attack, he absolutely dominates defenders. He's got that big 4-star offer list, right? Michigan's after him. Notre Dame's after him. I can tell you specifically Notre Dame really, really wants him, really, really wanted him. And so it's just checking every box from the offer list standpoint, the film standpoint, the frame standpoint. And the other thing here that's kind of interesting, if you look at Roeske, what has been one of the biggest criticisms of this coaching staff? It's been the inability to land in-state talent, right? Regardless of how important you think that is, I see you, Curtis. Regardless of how important you think that is, that in-state talent, you have to land it, right? And this kind of stems that tide a little bit. You have the Flanagans going to Notre Dame. You have Sexton going to Penn State. Those are both players the Badgers really wanted, the staff really wanted, to be able to go in and get Roeske away from these our blue blood players, our blue chip players. That's a big win for this staff. Wayne Meyer says it's a good 3-star get. I think he's going to end up being a 4-star. He really, when you look at him and you compare him to a guy like Sexton, right, who does end up being like a 4-star, or Sexton. I'm trying to think of the other one. That went to Minnesota. It's blanking on the top of my head. He looks a lot like Sexton, except he's already carrying the weight, right? Sexton, with the movement skills and the frame, everyone lauds the upside. And I love Sexton. Roeske looks a lot like Sexton, except you don't have to worry whether or not he's going to be able to carry the weight. So I think it's a big get. I think Badger fans should be excited about it. I know people are a little jaded right now, but you still got to recruit. You got to keep bringing in talent. The other thing I'll talk about really quickly with the 2025 class, now you've hit on your quarterback, Layden Locke. You've hit on a really good defensive back in Remington Moss, and you've hit on your left tackle potentially. So 3 premium positions already kind of locked in that 2025 class. All really good players, all players that, all positions that Wisconsin needs to continue upgrading at. So I think it's a good sign for that 2025 class. And then you look at that 24 class with 5 offensive linemen coming in, they're bringing in bodies, right? They realize the offensive line position is a bit of an issue. They are bringing in bodies. They are bringing in reinforcements. This is a really good get for the Badgers. We should be very excited about it. Wes Mullenix says, hope he's as good as Jack Nelson. All you can do is keep bringing in talent. That's all you can do. You got to keep bringing in talent. Nathan Roy, thank you. Yeah, Nathan Roy is the other one I couldn't remember. I don't know if he's in that class, but he's definitely in the Garrett Sexton class, which is kind of that 4-star, big, rangy, athletic offensive tackle. So I'm excited about it. We're going to take a quick break for friends of the show over at Gametime, and then we're going to talk about Hunter Wohler and why I think it was so refreshing to hear him say what he did, why I think as fans we kind of needed that. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers, but first we're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show over at Gametime. Gametime is the number one place to buy any tickets, anything you need from an entertainment standpoint. Gametime is the fastest, easiest, quickest place to buy those last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to buy and find tickets for any kind of an event. Again, it's not just sports, concerts. You want to take your lady to a concert, right? Build up some good behavior points so that next season when the Badgers are better, you're able to lock in and remind her of all the great things you did for her this year. And the next year you use Gametime to buy those Badger tickets. Plus you get to see the view from your seat even before it starts. So you know exactly what your seat is going to look like. Last minute flash sales, you get the best prices, no longer having to plan months and months in advance. It's simple, it's easy. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDON, college, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. You're going to love it. All right, let's keep going here, but let's just take some comments. And then I want to get into what Hunter Wohler had to say, because I think it's really important. And I think as fans, what he said shouldn't be understated. But let's get some comments here. This is Steve Mitchell says, other than recruiting, it's time to talk about other Badger teams that care if they win or lose. This football team has quit. I have a hard time. I think part of it has. I think, Steve, part of this football team probably has mailed it in a little bit. I don't know. I'm very interested to see, and I keep saying this, and people might be sick of hearing it. People might be sick of talking about it. I keep saying I'm waiting for the response, right? This Badgers team has been punched a couple times in the mouth, and it doesn't feel like they've counterpunched as much as fans would like, as much as some of them would like, as much as this program's tradition would generally indicate they would punch back. So I'm hopeful after some of the comments I'm going to get into it with Hunter Wohler, maybe we see a little bit of that line in the sand. Maybe we see a little bit of that response against Nebraska. It's got to come at some point, I would hope. Deborah says, yeah, Glenn, I think you identified the cascading issues that developed under Christ since at least 2020. That's from Glenn. There's a Glenn Miller comment up here. It's apparent below average recruiting classes, COVID transfers, several head coaching changes, other expectations have created a situation where 2 to 3 recruiting classes and stability are needed. I think we all undersold it. We had, I think Curtis on the show the other day who was talking about something broke during COVID. I think it was Curtis, or no, maybe it was Kedrick. I think it was Kedrick. He said something broke during COVID, and this program has never fully gotten back to where it was. I think, it's like we have a deck on our house, and the beam underneath it has slowly been rotting out for years, like probably 5-10 years. The deck looks great. There's wisteria growing over the top, but that foundation is breaking. So I've been doing some repairs to it. But the point is that foundation didn't break yesterday. It didn't break in the last year. It didn't break in the last 5 years. It broke probably starting 10 years ago, right, when people stopped painting it before I even moved in. This foundation has been cracking for a while. For several years, this foundation has been cracking. And we kind of missed it, right? Because the deck still looked good. The paint on the Titanic still looked good, right? So we kind of missed what was happening underneath the surface. We talked about it. I mean, I definitely talked about it a little bit, but not as much as I should have. Like the recruiting classes. Here's another one that we didn't talk about enough. These players, some of them have had 3 coaches in 3 years. 4 coaches in 4 years. You look at the quarterbacks on the roster, Miles Burkett, the change he's gone through. You look at the offensive linemen. In the last 3 years, they've had 3 different coaches, right? You went from Rudolph to Bosted to Bicknell. That's just not sustainable. Like that player development suffers when that happens. You look at look at the running backs. How many different coaches does Braylon Allen have? No, we can crush Braylon all we want for maybe not being as tough as we want, maybe not playing as much as we want, maybe not being able to be that bell cow. He's had 3 different coaches in 3 years for a running back who really didn't become a running back till later in his high school career. He needed better coaching too, and that's not on him, right? So I think, yeah, Glenn, it's a good point. There's a lot of underlying issues here that need to get fixed, and this is going to take a couple of recruiting classes to fix, and that's something that we did not do a good enough job. I did not do a good enough job of recognizing and talking about and discussing and setting expectations. Yeah, it's going to take a few recruiting classes, and I think we can comfortably say that now. Let's see. Brian Dotson says, why isn't Renfro playing? Also, Rucci at left tackle. That's a great question. I'm not going to blow smoke. I have no idea why. I have no idea what's going on with Renfro. I thought maybe we'd start seeing him some reps down the stretch here, just because you're kind of in that window where he could still, I think, get the red shirt, kind of a medical and come back next year. I don't know. And the thing with Rucci, if you remember, this was about week 4 or 5. They asked about Rucci. I forget who. In one of the press conferences, they asked Fickell about Rucci. I said, why is he not playing? And Luke Fickell said essentially, and this isn't a direct quote, but he said essentially we have 6 to 7 guys we trust, and Rucci wasn't in that group, right? He for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I can tell you from behind the scenes, I talked to somebody who they say Rucci's still going to be a really good player. He seems locked in. Him catching that touchdown pass against Illinois will tell you he's locked in practice, because they're not going to create that play and run that play for somebody who isn't still practicing hard. I have no idea. I don't know why Rucci hasn't been able to crack the rotation. I would say, and I said this last week, I said the week before, I think it's time you start seeing some younger players who maybe are more bought in. Like if you're going to lose anyway, if you're going to lose 24-3 or 24-10, if you're going to lose to these teams that really, even with our injuries, don't have the talent level we probably have, then you might as well do it with younger players who have some upside and maybe care a little bit more. That's what I would say. Let's see. Let's get into what Hunter Wohler had to say. So to me, this is really interesting. Then we'll get back to comments. Hunter Wohler, I don't have the quote in front of me. I lost it, actually. I had it up. But you can see I'm traveling right now, so it's kind of my logistics are everywhere. But Hunter Wohler basically said, we need to find out which players on this program, he said a word I can't say, give a crap. Who wants to be here? Who doesn't want to be here? There may be a weeding out process. It's time we spoke up. It's time we figured out what we're doing here, who wants to win, who's bought in, and not everybody is. He went on a rant. And let me tell you, this was awesome. This was awesome because here's the thing. I think maybe this is me as a fan, and let me know in the comments if this is you. Like, to some degree, not for perpetuity, but to some degree, I can take losing, right? I can understand a team that just isn't very good. Like, those things happen, right? I've been fans of teams that have been not very good for a decade, right? Like, to some degree, you can understand that, but you want to know that somebody in the locker room gives a crap, that somebody on the team also feels the pain of losing. You want to know that somebody on the team is invested enough that it's not acceptable. And as a fan, at the bare minimum, that's what you want to see. After you watch an incredibly lackluster Northwestern game, as a fan, you just want to know, is anybody on the team as frustrated as I am? And yes, I know there are. Like, I'm not sitting here pretending like I put more into the team than these players do. But let's also not pretend that some of these players are 18, 19-year-old kids from Florida, Texas, California. They're not as invested as in the program as somebody who spent 3 decades watching it and paying for things. It's a different type of investment, 100%. Like, I'm not impacting wins and losses. Other fans aren't, but there's a huge emotional investment to being a fan. And as a fan, you just want to know that at times when the product on the field doesn't match up with what it should be, that players on the team give a crap. They give an absolute doggone bit of, I can't say some of the words I want to say, but that's Hunter Wohler coming out and saying those words lets you know that there's players in the locker room that say, yeah, we do give a crap. This sucks. It's not good enough. Let's fix it. And that's why I'm really interested this week, particularly, what kind of impact one of the leaders on the team. Let's be honest. Hunter Wohler is one of the guys on the team that has the right to speak, right? Everybody has the right to speak, but Hunter Wohler is one of the players on the team that has the right to put others on blast. He has been consistently probably the best player in defense pretty easily the entire year. He's been out there the entire year. He's from Wisconsin. He knows what this program is because he grew up watching it. He gives a crap. And as a fan, that's what we want to see. And that's why I thought those words were so refreshing to hear, because there's only so much you can take of, we're going to practice better. We have to start faster. At some point in time, that talk kind of wears off. You need to hear players say, no, not good enough. Embarrassing. We got to get better. And if you're not here to get better, you get the heck out the door. And it's just me. I thought hearing that was refreshing, right? And it shows you that there's still some fire in that locker room. And I'm sure he's not the only one, right? I'm not naming any names, but again, as a fan, it is nice to hear one of the leaders on the team say, this is not acceptable. We have to figure out who wants to be here and who doesn't want to be here. And we're going to start seeing that pretty quickly, right? I think it's pretty clear that, listen, you heard Luke Fickell kind of talk around it. You've heard Hunter Wohler kind of talk around it. It's pretty clear some players aren't fully bought in. I'm not going to name anybody, but if the players are saying that, you know that's true. And we need to see who the players that are bought in are. So the next couple of weeks, watch for the young players that play. Watch for maybe, I'm not going to say older players that don't play, but just see how this might look in the next 2 weeks to get maybe a snapshot of what it might look like going into next year. Ryan Bliss says Hunter Wohler is the lone guy you can point to who's laying it on the line every game, every play. I think there's others, Ryan, but absolutely Ryan, you can point to it. Strong first name, by the way, Ryan. I love it. A couple comments with Allegro. Curtis Blyce says Christian Allegro. Charlie said Allegro is the next linebacker Fick sets to the draft. Allegro's a stud. Allegro is a total stud. And that's a Fickell guy, right? That's a guy they identified him late. They grabbed him late. Versatile, big athlete, can play kind of a coverage linebacker, can also blitz. Yeah, he's a total stud. And I can't wait to see him grow into next year. I think there's a couple. I think Tyler Jancey has a chance coming into next year. I think Lafayette is going to play next year. This linebacker group could be a lot more expensive. Thomas Heiberger, I don't think he'll be ready, but in a year or two, Heiberger has crazy athletic tools. So Anyway, my bigger point here is Hunter Wohler. There's others. Tanner Mordecai said, oh, Brian Shetty put that on here. I appreciated Mordecai stating it too. He may not be performing to the way we wanted him to, and I know he is not performing to the way he wanted to, but even he called out, yep. I think a couple other players did too, but Hunter Wohler was definitely the most vociferous. And again, it's appreciated. And here's the other thing. Here's the last thing I'll say with this. Everybody knows it, right? People, if you watch football, if you know this program, you can see a bad product on the field, right? Everybody knows it. So let's stop talking around it. Let's acknowledge it. Let's say this isn't good enough and it has to get better. And that's what Hunter Wohler did. That's why it was refreshing. We're going to come back. We're going to take a few more comments and then just talk about why Fickell is still the right hire. Why we need to stop with the bring Jim Leonard back. We made a mistake. Oh no, what is McIntosh doing? No, Luke Fickell was the right hire. He still is the right hire. Let's talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Jace Medical. And, this is something that we've talked about Jace Medical quite a bit. We've talked about, the ability to empower your family. We've talked about the need to be able to empower your family to take care of yourself. Jace Medical also has a really great ability to get your everyday medications. Something that, if you need something for a 12-month supply, you can stock up with Jace Medical, Viagra, Cialis, all these things. You can get that on Jace Medical. So you don't need to worry about extended trips, possible supply chain issues with natural disasters, not being able to get to the pharmacy. Look, we're still reeling from 2020. I was literally at a pizza joint yesterday, and the guy said what's the cheese you put on pizza? Our mozzarella supply chain is still a little wonky. We're still reeling from it. Jace Medical allows you to get all of the medications that you need, plus life-saving antibiotics, 5 different ones that treat over 50 diseases. You get it in a Jace Medical case. I have a Jace case. And it's something that you can use to protect your family in case of emergencies, protect yourself in case of emergencies. A verified customer had this to say about Jace. I am thankful for the service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut the pills that I have in half. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year supply, and I also got the antibiotic kit. I feel more secure now, and prices are lower than pharmacies. If you are someone who wants peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily medication, go to jacemedical.com. See if it's offered to you. Remember to use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. All right, let's keep going here. I want to talk really quickly about Luke Fickell and just some of the comments that, and I get it. I get it, right? This has not worked the way people thought, and people are having buyer's remorse. I get it. However, multiple things are true here. This season is not good enough. True. This season has not met expectations. True. These are true things. You don't need to caveat that. You don't need to say this season hasn't met expectations because of X, Y, and Z. No. It hasn't met expectations, period. This is Wisconsin. This is not Rutgers. This is not Illinois. This is not Indiana football. Okay? The season has not met expectations. Full stop, period, bold, italics, whatever you want to do. However, you can say those things and then still also say Luke Fickell's still the right hire. Right? All these things can be equally true. I get the comment a lot that Wisconsin is the new Nebraska. No, it is not. You become Nebraska by cycling through multiple coaches. That's how you become Nebraska. You make poor hires, and then you double down by making further poor hires. You double down by panicking and getting rid of people you hire. You double down by not giving people you hire an opportunity to succeed. You double down by continuing to churn through schemes and systems. That's how you become Nebraska. You do not become Nebraska by hiring Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell has a track record, a proven track record. And if you were on board, you thought it was a great hire, which, by the way, universally everybody did. I shouldn't say everybody. 98% of people did, right? And I respect to the people who did it. Like, if you didn't think it was a great hire, maybe ultimately you'll end up being right. But if you thought it was a great hire, which the majority of people did, and we acknowledge that this foundation has been cracking for a while and it needs work, then you don't throw that out after a year, period. Luke Fickell came in. We had a really interesting comment from Curtis on the other day's show. He said, Luke Fickell kind of came in and tried to be kind of the stepdad, right? He didn't really want a fully clean house, which I get, because if you come into a program with this culture, you don't want to toss a grenade into the locker room. I think everybody from Luke Fickell down to me, down to everybody, thought this was a more talented roster than it is. Let's see what he does this offseason. Like, I think you're going to see a lot of change. The honeymoon's over, right? The honeymoon's been over, but it's still the right hire. And it's the right hire for everything around the program, right? The recruiting department had to be revamped, and Luke Fickell was the guy to do that. The marketing side had to be revamped with NIL. Luke Fickell was the guy to do that. Like, this would not be a better program if Jim Leonhard was here right now. It wouldn't. Maybe it's cleaner in areas, but it's probably not as strong in the recruiting area. It's probably not as strong in other areas. This was a program that needed a pretty drastic shift in course, and they achieved that. And I think they achieved that successfully, by the way. Luke Fickell's still the right guy. He was the right hire. This season, as frustrating as it is, hasn't really shaken my confidence in that. That's where I'm at. Let me jump to the comments quick. Deborah says, Fickell walked into her program with 13 commits. Chris couldn't find quarterbacks or running backs. That's true. Joe Frickleton, worst offense line in years. Yeah. It is. It's so bad, guys and gals. It's almost, and it's so bad with so much recruited talent. It's unbelievable. I think some of that is, again, multiple coaches cycling through. I don't think Joe Rudolph was a developer of talent. Bob Bosta just had a year. Now they're switching schemes. You can kind of tell how a guy like Jack Nelson's head could still be spinning, but at the same point, like, the performance hasn't been good enough, and the excuses are wearing very thin. Let's go here. Mike Dowling says it's an effort issue, not talent. Joe Frickleton says overrated this roster is. I like it. A little Yoda there. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the goal for me, and this is where I'm at, guys and gals, for the rest of the year: win the Axe, get to the bowl game, get extra practices, regroup in the offseason. Those 4 things: win the Axe, bowl game, bowl practices, regroup in the offseason. This is from Bob. He said the only reason to want the Badgers to go to a bowl game is the extra practices for the underclassmen. Absolutely. Those bowl practices are incredibly important. And boy, do you need them. Boy, do you need them to springboard into next year. So if you're a Badger fan and you're kind of stuck in the malaise of, I don't care, the season stinks, I get it. We need those bowl practices. Lee H says, team totally underachieving. Shame goes to the players, not the coaches. The players are men, not toddlers. Listen, I've always said this. I think there's blame everywhere. I don't absolve these coaches. Like that. At the end of the day, there's always something you can do a little better in every situation. I think that's kind of a universal life thing that I try to apply to myself. There's always something I could have done better. I guarantee you Luke Fickell's going to, if you talk to him and said there's things he could do better. But yeah, a lot of this blame, I think, is on the players. It's the players not executing, the players not playing well enough. This is from Connor. I wish we could bring Jim Leonhard back. We are desperate. If Iowa can win games with only their defense, imagine if we had Jim this year. And that's kind of the point I was talking to earlier. And listen, that's a fair point. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody they're wrong for thinking Jim might have been the better hire. I just think there's too many underlying issues for Jim Leonhard to have this team in any better spot this year than it is. And maybe it'd be worse, to be honest. Sure, the locker room would probably be more bought in, but I don't think they do what they did in the portal. I don't think the recruiting department is that much better. I think Luke Fickell was the right guy. He was the right hire. I 100% think that. Greg James says, Fickell is the second best coach in the Big Ten. In 2 years, you'll be a top 3 team. Let's go, Greg. Let's get some positivity in here. I love it. Let's wrap up here. Let's go. Curtis Blaze says, I love it, Ryan. That's the goal. P says, all agreed, Ryan. Donnie Hayes says, how is Jack Nelson still starting? Curtis Blaze says, Nebraska win would be nice under the lights. 100%. Listen, if we could beat Nebraska and Minnesota to wrap up the season, that would be incredible right now. Let's just go 1-1. I mean, I hate to. At one point, I was like, we're gonna go 3-1 down the stretch. Then I was like, maybe it's 2-1. And now it's like, can we just? We have to get the axe. We absolutely have to get the axe. Anyway, we're gonna wrap it up there. Really do appreciate everybody. I know this show is a little late today. I'm trying to figure out. I have some scheduling stuff, from travel stuff. So, but there's a lot of content coming up. A couple guests this week. If you're interested, come join our Discord. We talk Badgers on there, plus a lot of other things. So on Wisconsin, Mitch James will finish on this one. I'm sold on Fickell. He deserves some time. Right there with you, Mitch. Anyway, on Wisconsin, thank you for sticking with me. My voice is still a little off, but we're going to talk again tomorrow. A lot of content this week. Let's go.